I left my grandmother's house to confront them. How could you do this to me?
You sound like an ungrateful child. We took care of you right from the day you were born, even though we didn't want you. The money we took isn't even enough compensation for putting up with your presence. Not to mention that we were thrown out of several restaurants and shops because your card was declined. It was incredibly embarrassing.
Matter of fact, we need more money for our vacation in 2 weeks, and this time it better not get declined. We were nearly beaten up by the security at one of the shops.
I had returned late from my workplace one day and went straight to bed immediately after freshening up and eating dinner. While asleep, I thought I heard the sound of my door open and the footsteps of someone walking in. But I was too sleepy to open my eyes.
Yes, stay asleep. I'll only take a little and leave.
I woke up the next day and prepared for work. Once I was ready, I walked out of the house without checking my bag. I had been paid the previous day, in cash, and was planning on depositing it in the bank. I arrived at the bank earlier than I expected. Luckily, I didn't have to wait in line very long. When it was my turn, they asked me to present the cash I wanted to deposit, and was met with the biggest shock of my life when I dipped my hand into my bag and brought out only a few dollars. I was sure that I had quite a bit more in my bag before going to bed last night. How did it reduce? It was my second salary. I'd been working as a junior chef for 2 months. After the first month's salary took a long while to get to me, I was advised to receive it in cash and deposit it myself. I left the bank that day, sad and confused. Arriving home, I found my parents and elder brother in the living room, dancing to a soft music playing from a seemingly new speaker, each of them holding a glass of juice in their hands. They all saw me walk in, but ignored me. I wasn't expecting a different reaction. I'd always been ignored by them. I'd barely even taken a step away when the doorbell suddenly rang.
It's here.
I wondered what they were expecting, seeing their excited reaction to the sound of the doorbell. I stood and watched as my mom opened the door and my dad and brother brought in a laundry machine bigger than our current one. I wondered how they managed to get the money for it, as I'd overheard my dad complain to my mom the other day about being low on cash. I resumed heading to my room while they continued their jubilation. My parents never loved me. They'd always choose my elder brother over me and made it clear to me. You might be wondering why. Well, my brother, being the eldest child of my parents and their only son, was meant to inherit my grandfather's business once he was 25. My grandfather used to be a widely known chef when he was alive and had lots of restaurants. In his will, it was confirmed that he wanted my father and his elder brother to own and manage his businesses. While my uncle focused on keeping my grandfather's legacy, my father barely assisted him and only demanded money from him. Last month, my uncle got tired and reported him to the family's lawyer. The lawyer called for a meeting, and it was further revealed there that my grandfather had declared that if either of his boys refused to look after his businesses, the son of that brother would take over his father's position once he was 25. My father, who was lazy and did not want to work, agreed to allow his son to take over when he got to the agreed age. He made a deal with his brother. My uncle alone would run the businesses until my elder brother was of age, and then he would let him join him in running the restaurants. Ever since, my parents considered my brother their golden child. They had a plan to milk the restaurants as much as they could when my brother got to be in charge. They'd make as much money as they could and leave for a faraway country to start a new life. Of course, I wasn't involved. All my life, I'd been pushed away by them. They always reminded me about me being a mistake. They hadn't planned to have me, so I wasn't needed. I wasn't bothered about them, nor was I bothered about what they thought of me. I was determined to make my future better all by myself. The next day, after leaving my workplace, I visited my grandmother at her home where she stayed alone. My grandmother cared deeply about me. She'd noticed my love for cooking long before I did and helped me with the basics. After high school, I announced to my parents that I'd love to study business in college. But their replies, although expected, broke my heart.
College? We have no money for your college education. Get a job.
If we had the money, do you think we'd give it to you? You weren't wanted in the first place. This is what you get for forcing yourself into our lives, idiot.
I ran over to my grandmother's in tears and explained it to her. I wanted to study business and also get into a part-time cooking academy. My grandmother patted my back gently and promised to help me through it. True to her words, she sponsored my college education, alongside the fees for the cooking academy. I graduated 6 months ago and got a job as a waitress, but eventually moved up being a sous chef. The next month, when my salary came in again, I decided to deposit it in my bank account right away. It took 2 days before it was cleared, but I didn't mind. I deposited a huge amount into a prepaid credit card and hid it beneath a vase in my room. I was planning to start a restaurant the coming year, and I'd told my grandmother about it. Suddenly, 2 months later, my family started living luxuriously. They went on vacations regularly, changed everything in the house, excluding the things in my room. Although I was curious about how they suddenly got the money for it, I ignored them and focused on working harder for my business. The months flew by very quickly, and the month I'd planned to kickstart my business finally came. I was excited about it. My grandmother was too. She couldn't stop telling me how proud of me she was. And I got home that night and fetched my credit card from where I hid it. I dropped it into my bag to make it easier for me the next day. Arriving at my bank the next day, I was presented with the biggest shock of my life. The amount left was less than $1,000. I'd kept over $20,000 in there, but it was nearly all gone. I felt my heart nearly exploding in my chest. I went online and checked my card statements and saw charges for flights which were always for 3 people, shopping, gaming, and so on. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was plainly obvious that my family had gotten a hold of my card and had used it. I was in tears and headed straight to my grandmother's home. After spending a long time crying in her arms, I knew my parents hated me, but I couldn't understand how they could have done this. I was boiling with anger. I left my grandmother's house to confront them. How could you do this to me?
You sound like an ungrateful child. We took care of you right from the day you were born, even though we didn't want you. The money we took isn't even enough compensation for putting up with your presence. Not to mention that we were thrown out of several restaurants and shops because your card was declined. It was incredibly embarrassing.
Matter of fact, we need more money for our vacation in 2 weeks, and this time it better not get declined. We were nearly beaten up by the security at one of the shops.
Tears streamed down my eyes. Words failed me so much. The moment I tried to speak again, I was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. I was surprised to see my grandmother walk in, along with my uncle, the lawyer, and 2 cops. Why are you here, grandmother?
Did you think I'd sit still and watch them destroy your plans? These lazy lot have no ounce of conscience in them. Please take them.
I realized the men were truly cops. No matter how much my parents and brother tried to resist, they ended up getting handcuffed. My uncle spoke next.
You've always been greedy. You got into a lot of problems while we were kids and put our parents in deep worry always. I thought you'd change your ways since you now have children. I guess I was wrong. You're even more greedy and have passed it to your son.
I was touched seeing how they were standing up for me. That money was meant for my business.
Your grandmother told me everything. Well, luckily, you won't have to be too bothered about it.
I didn't understand what he meant, so he made it clear to me. According to him, since my brother, who'd be turning 25 this year, didn't have any idea about business management or cooking, he won't be able to take up my grandfather's business. I was also a child of my father and had the right qualifications, so I was fit to take my brother's position, even though I wasn't 25 yet.
No, that can't happen. It belongs to my son, not her. Well, your son can't run the business from jail, can he?
The lawyer confirmed that it was possible for me to take over since my grandmother proposed it first. My parents and brothers were taken away while I hugged my grandmother, crying heavily on her shoulder. I quit my job the next day to begin assisting my uncle. I refused to handle it alone. I wanted to be with him instead, and he couldn't help but express how proud he was of my maturity. My parents and brother were charged with theft and fraudulence for stealing my money and trying to get away with it. Each of them got 5 years in jail. I didn't think that was enough punishment, so I requested to have them pay my money too. Since they had no money of their own, their houses and belongings were sold off, and I got my money back. It's been 2 years with my uncle, and we've both managed to grow the restaurants to 2 different countries. I stay with my grandmother now, and I do everything in my power to make sure she stays healthy. Something still bothers me, though. Were my parents punished enough?